Those who say wait for visible unity, wait for the liberation of the African American village community. I declare.
Welcome to Shaping Young Minds. I am your host, Mariah. I'm a journalism student, and hosting this show is my first step in my career in broadcast journalism. I look forward to a career in the entertainment industry as a reporter of entertainment news, culture, fashion, and red carpet interviews. Shaping Young Minds show ran for 5 years on this network from 2005 until 2010, and now we are back and better than ever. We are a mentorship show, and we are seeking more adult mentors to come on and share your knowledge with our youth. If you would like to be a guest on Shaping Young Minds, please email us your bio to symtvshow@gmail.com. Again, that's symtvshow@gmail.com. Thank you. As for my fellow young people, we would love to hear from you as well. Hit us up at symtvshow@gmail.com. All right, we'll be right back. Don't touch that remote. Today, my guests are members of Neighborhood Development, NDS. NDS is a non-for-profit organization that we expect will be our regular guests on our show. So today we want to get to know them and find out what their organization is all about. Welcome to the show, and thank you for coming today. Please introduce each of yourselves to our audience.
My name is Norman. I'm president of NDS.
My name is John Orey. I'm a vice president of NDS.
Hi, my name is Joseph Montgomery, and I am the secretary of the board at NDS. But I also do the tours, the historical cultural tours for NDS.
All right, were you all born in Chicago?
Yes, I was born in Chicago. Actually, I was born at a hospital called Lewis Memorial Hospital. It's torn down now, but it's right in the Bronzeville neighborhood in which I conduct a lot of my tours. And I was also educated here. I graduated from Northeastern Illinois University. My degree is in inner city studies, and it's a very cultural, very African-centric type educational program, and that's what led me to do the historical tours in Bronzeville, because it's so much information and it's so many things to see that it's really interesting, and our young people need to learn more about their history and their culture.
I agree.
My name's John. I was born in Lincoln, Illinois, which was named for Lincoln, and Lincoln attended the ceremony of naming Lincoln. I also attended Lincoln College. I hold 2 degrees from Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. I moved to Chicago in 1984 to attend University of Illinois Chicago for a graduate program in organizational psychology, and that's where I met Norman in 1986, where we worked together at the University of Illinois Survey Research Lab.
My name is Norman Montgomery. I was born in Chicago. I was born at Providence Hospital. Grew up in Ida B. Wells. Went to school in Gary, Indiana at Horace Mann. And from there I went down to Atlanta, Georgia, where I went to Morehouse College. When I graduated from Morehouse College, I came back up into the area. I worked in St. Louis for a couple of years. I ran restaurants up here in the Chicago area, small fast food restaurants. And then on about 1985, I hired on at the university as a specialist in technology, in particular management information services.
Okay. And can you all tell me some of your personal goals?
Sure. One of my personal goals is to build a nonprofit organization that, nonprofits are so obscure, and a lot of times people be like, oh, they're not for profit. they're not for profit, and you kind of, for profit tends to take the leadership, and non-for-profits tend to get pushed towards the back. But I want to build a successful nonprofit, and it becomes a household name, like the United Way, like the Red Cross, you know what I'm saying? And so like that's one of the goals that I like to have. I also like to educate young people in their history, because I meet so many young people today, and they don't have a clue, about how they got here, how their families got here, how they came up, the migration, into various cities like Chicago, New York, Philly. So to improve their knowledge and where they came from, that's what I would like to do.
Well, as I mentioned before, when I came to Chicago, I was fortunate enough to do some public policy research along with Norman at the Survey Research Lab, and I became ever increasingly aware of the needs in many of the neighborhoods within the city of Chicago, and was fortunate enough to be a technician and also a trained researcher. So Norm and I we've kind of we're on the board. I tend to have dirty fingernails from working on computers and putting things in. We've been involved with refurbishing and delivering computers to after-school programs, senior homes, and also wanting to provide the education to unleash the power that is within the young people in this city, and so I'm very passionate about providing services and serving as a catalyst, our organization to serve as a catalyst to empowering the youth within this city.
Interesting.
Goals, I started in technology back before it was even a thing. In the 60s, I began by building my own computer. In the 70s, started out in data processing and programming. When I began computer processing, the language was Fortran 4. Now it's Fortran something else. I've been in it for so long, I've watched it go through so many steps, and I've seen what it can do for various individuals. And having worked in the industry as long as I have, my interests now aren't in making a computer do something, but in how we can apply what the computer does to various different things. And that's what the not-for-profit allows me to do. That's what we do when we discuss language. That's what we do when we talk about technology. It's a method of communication. It's a way of getting information across to someone else. And that, I believe, is the most important thing, is how well you can communicate whatever your truth is to the next person. And that's pretty much what I use the non-for-profit for. That's what our little learning system is about. That's what our classes and our seminars and that kind of stuff is all about.
How old were you when you first built your first computer, and what interests you to do that?
I was probably about 14 years old. It was a Heath kit back in the early 60s when you wanted to do something in electronics. It was a Heath kit. And to be honest with you, it was a class project. When we were in school, they made us take electric shop or metal shop or wood shop. But you had to take a vocation or a skill. Since I was in electric shop, you could build a hot dog cooker, or you could build a lamp, with a light bulb. But it was a lot more interesting to build something that did something. And you know, when you first build a computer, you believe that it's going to magically answer all the questions for you. So building the first computer was an eye-opener, because what it taught me was you have to know it before you can tell it to the computer. And the only way you get it back from the computer is that you put it into the computer. And that little cycle right there was where we began. And it showed me that we were more important than computers. I mean, you know, they don't exist without us. They can't have anything in them unless we put it there. And they only do what we say. So we can't blame them. we have to look at ourselves. But that was my interest.
Thank you. Wow, that was all very interesting. Now we also want to acknowledge Miss Willia Allen. She is a key part of your organization. Please tell us about her.
Dr. Allen, Dr. Willia Allen, is probably one of the longest running CPAs that I have ever known. She received her CPA somewhere back in the late 40s, early 50s, and she has been a practicing accountant ever since. She is the core of what we do, and to be honest with you, as she describes to us, she's the janitor. She cleans up after us. She makes sure that what we do is correct and accurate. She makes sure that we've got our I's dotted and our T's crossed. And she's imparted a wealth of knowledge in terms of her experience in looking at various circumstances and in knowing what's going on without having to, how do you say, go through and scrape your knee. You don't have to fall down and take the bump to learn the lesson. She's been great in terms of that, and has helped steer us in the right direction.
She sounds like an incredible woman.
Oh.
Well, she's a mentor squared. She's a mentor to the mentors.
Yes.
And you cannot go to any nonprofit like where we often meet at National Black Wall Street or any place within the city of Chicago, and somebody will say, "Oh yes, Dr. Allen, she's the one that saved my nonprofit. She's the one that kept us in business." So she's pretty amazing.
She is a very amazing woman.
Now, Mr. Norman, please tell us more about your role at NDS and what is your specialty?
My role at NDS currently is one of a project coordinator. Generally, I will undertake what we will call data development. Before we go into an area, before we go into working in an area, we really like to know what the area is about. So we engage in a little bit of research. And that research may be demographics, it may be a count of schools, it may be the number of single-family homes. We look for those characteristics in a community that will comprise what we call a possible strength, something that they can build on. And from there, once we can locate that, we then take a look at educational offerings. And we attempt to pair the educational offering with something in the community that could benefit from that knowledge. A lot of times people don't do something wrong intentionally, but in the need to do something wrong, you feel this desire to do something, and the action you take may not necessarily be the most beneficial. You're not out there trying to do any harm. You feel motivated to take an action, but you may not have all of the information. You may not know what the best action is to take. And then all of a sudden, we're all back into the loop again. I mean, you know, we're all back into trying to repair something that we've done, or we're trying to fix something that went wrong, instead of continuing on a path of progress. You know, we're still patching and fixing and correcting when we really want to take a look at where we're going and see if we can determine what the proper step is, and not necessarily always. Now, errors are a part of discovery. Errors are a part of learning. But the ability to capture it, to understand it, and to avoid it, we can tend to call that growth. So, I mean, you know, I'll stumble a couple of times, but it doesn't mean I have to stumble every time. And hopefully within our learning ability, within what we do, the community sees what it needs, sees the step to take, and rather than having to stumble through, takes the firm step. It may be a small step. It may not be the large, grandiose step, because everyone wants to take a step that does something, goes somewhere, makes some great change. And great change is quite well the possibility of a number of smaller things all around it, all coming into play. So we just try and figure out what is the best step to take when you're looking at a problem. When you take an action, does it make the problem better? Does it make it worse? And pretty much before we go acting in an area, before we go into an area and try and do something, we really try and figure out whether or not what we're going to do, and second, whether it's going to help the situation that we're getting into. And pretty much once we've determined that we can actually make a difference or make some improvement in a given area, generally the first step in that area is education. Knowing whatever it is that you need to know to avoid the problem, to fix the problem, to correct the problem, where it applies. And generally that tool is technology, or that tool is history, because a lot of the problems we face, the answers are in our history. But if we don't know our history, if we can't look back at our history, we're going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So, you know, it's kind of like we've got everything right here in front of us. We just need to know how to put it together. It's kind of like that puzzle, you know, get the pieces right, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much the way I see what I do at NDS. I will take a look at an issue. I will take a look and see whether there's a tool that might make a difference. And then once we get to that point, if the tool is technology, if the tool is some application of history, if the tool is some application of finance or some application of business, then we consult one of the subject matter experts, Joseph or John or Dr. Allen, and we see if there's something that we can do to move the process forward. Just a small step, you know, no earth-changing, we're going to save the world type stuff, just small step, proper step, make a correction, keep going forward, stuff like that.
Okay.
You know, if I could like just interject it, you know, like but in the communities nowadays, it's so many problems, it's so many things that you can address. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like there's hunger, and you know, there's like literacy problems, educational problems as far as, you know, going to college, higher learning and stuff like that. It's so many. If you're interested in improving your community and getting involved, I mean, there's so many things that you can do. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like you can literally have 100 things that you could do, whether it's clothing giveaways, food giveaways, educational classes, teaching people about computers, teaching people, you know, about their history and stuff. So, you know, you really do have to disseminate, you know, as far as what you want to do, you know, what your strength is, and, you know, what you have the resources to do in order to deliver that program and improve the, you know, the plight of the people in your community. You know, so, you know, and when we set up at meetings and stuff like that, it's so many things, you know, know, that we go over and that we could do. And I mean, even now, even though, like, you know, I do tourism and John does tech and Norman does Espanol for You, you know, like in Espanol for You, a lot of African American children, they don't know how to speak Spanish, but Spanish is becoming a very popular avenue, a very popular medium in the city of Chicago, you know, and plus and wherever you go, they ask you if you're bilingual or stuff like that. So, you know, it's like if you have the time and the inclination and the manpower and you can deliver those programs successfully, then they aid the community. You know, and that's something that, you know, that we struggle with all the time, you know, because as a another class, like for Espanol for You, there's a lot of Spanish people that want to learn English. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you know, they want to be naturalized. They want to become U.S. citizens, and they have to do things, you know, in order to, you know, pass the test and, you know, know various facts about, you know, United States history and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's so much you can do out here, you know, but we try to, you know, encourage people's participation in our programs and stuff like that, because, you know, the more that they can add, you know, the better it is. You know, you get a different outlook when you have different responses from different people. So, you know, it's a challenging job.
Now, Mr. John, please tell us about your role at NDS.
Well, Norman and Joe have laid out, they're very certainly strategic thinkers. I'm more used to middle management, where I've been IT director at pharmacy and nursing and human resources at UIC, and I teach at, I've taught at Illinois Tech, and I currently now teach at Triton College, Computer Information Systems. So, and so what I look at is specifically opportunities that we have and how to implement those opportunities. So it could be something as simple as, you know, meeting some people that run a maybe an after-school program, and I noticed that they don't have a bunch of computers and things for the kids to play on or work on and learn from. And so then I take their bigger picture things that they have in mind. We try to turn them into bite-sized projects. We can say, okay, we're going to get X number of volunteers to come in 2 Saturdays, and we're going to wire up this building, or we're going to set up Wi-Fi, or we're going to set up the computers, and we're going to show people how to use them. And other things that, since my specializations are in IT management, I could do anything to do with cybersecurity, you know, safe computing, things of that nature. So I'm not picking the projects. I'm just trying to do and implement whatever it is that they've seen as opportunities, and that keeps me pretty busy, and it keeps me out of. I don't have to think too much about the big picture stuff. I just have to get the people there with the tools, and we got to fix things and make things work for people. So whether it's teaching or whether it's doing or some combination of the two, that's basically what I do.
Mr. Joseph, please tell us about your role at NDS and what is your specialty?
My role at NDS, as besides being the secretary of the board, mine is cultural and historical tours. And I got into historical tours is when I graduated from college. I went to Northeastern Illinois University, Center for Inner City Studies. I'm giving you a shout out, Conrad. I became interested in it because a lot of the stuff that, you know, as I grew up, you know, I was aware of, you know, various historical figures. I mean, you hear about famous black people, you know, that you read about in the textbooks and the history books. But the education there, it took it a little further. Their motto at the university is research the researcher. You know what I'm saying? So you might talk about Frederick Douglass or some other famous, but there's more information that can be found. So, but anyway, and when I graduated from there, right around the corner in that community was a nonprofit organization called Black Metropolis Convention and Tourism Council, and they specialize in these historic tours of the Bronzeville area. And so what I've done is not only taken those historical areas in Bronzeville, but have added on other areas like the Pullman Porters, which is out in the Pullman area. And you know, there's so many historical monuments and places for people to see. And when I came out and I started doing tours with Black Metropolis at the Bronzeville Visitor Information Center, I mean, I met people from other countries that wanted to learn about my history, wanted to learn about our history, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, like, I did tours with college students, you know, whereas and they would come with their professors, and they would be like, you know, we're interested in this, and we want to see this site, and you know, what do you know about this? And I was very intrigued, because it's like other people were more concerned with African American history than African Americans were. So I wanted to bridge that gap. I wanted to make an avenue so whereas school kids, high school kids, college kids, visitors, foreigners, when they came in, they could get an accurate depiction of exactly what our history is about, what these historical landmarks and monuments and places actually meant to the community. Because down in Bronzeville, they have what they call the Black Metropolis Historical District. And it consists of about 9 or 10 places. But besides the places, one of them was the Supreme Life building. Supreme Life was a Black-owned insurance company. And during the height of the Depression, you know, when literally people had no money, this was $1 million company in this little small area here, and all they did was write insurance policies for African Americans. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, another thing that I noticed, that in that area where that they existed, it was always prominent African American people, and you never heard about them. It was African American doctors, African American lawyers. So, you know, it's like we have always been a productive people. You know, we've always, you know, been at the top of education, you know, but when you look at news reports today and when you look at stuff today, all you see is you know, gangs and shootings and crimes and stuff like that. And it's really a poor, you know, when you see that and you constantly see it over and over again, then you get a negative approach. If all I hear is bad things about you, and I'll be like, I don't want to deal with Mariah, I don't want to go over into this neighborhood or anything like that, you don't really see the productive side of it. So, you know, that was one of the things that really interests me in doing that, and seeing the interest that other people had and what I was doing and what we were doing. It was really very encouraging, you know what I'm saying? And it's like not only from a educational point of view, but from an economic point of view as well. You know, because when I started doing that tours in Bronzeville, there was not a lot of tour companies doing them. Now you can go downtown, jump on a tour bus, and they'll bring you down in our community and show you our sites. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, you know, we need to be doing this. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I do in the organization, and you know, that's kind of like my motivation behind it, because you know, it's so much to learn. And you know, and it gives you, and as an individual, when I said to myself, you know what, I didn't know all of this stuff went on. You know what I'm saying? And but it gives you a better opportunity. It shows you who you are and where you come from. And I found out when young people know who they are and where they come from, it arms them, you know, and it prepares them for what they have to meet in society and what's coming up. You know, and it certainly helped me, and I want to pass that on.
All right, this is some good information. Okay, now we are going to explore a little deeper. Language, communication, verbal language, cultural language, Spanish. Oh, it is important to communicate more than one language?
Let us get into what we mean by language. There are languages that we have known through history: Spanish, German, Russian, Latin. But when we look at what we do, communications has a language, banking has a language, law has a language. Literally, the professions themselves have their own language. And to understand doing business, one of the first things we need to understand is the language of business. We're not going to do things in that area, in any area, if we don't speak the language of that area. And it was never clearer to me than when we began working with Spanish. When we talk in English, we may say the green car, we may say the white blouse, but have you noticed in other languages,
It's backwards.
it will be in reverse. You may say the blouse green, you may say the car white. And the structure of how you put the language together, the sequence and order of the words can mean something as well as the words you use. So right now we're looking at a whole conundrum of people arguing over what something means. You know, somebody gives you a sentence and to them it means one thing and to somebody else it means another thing, and we get into this subject of fake news and what is fake news, and I mean, and what we're talking about is the use of language and its context. I can say a number of things that are not fake, but they also are not true. They are just facts. And the context of how that fact is used is what makes it true or false, not just the subject that exists. So language is very, very important. You know, I mean, it's literally the crux of. When I graduated from Morehouse, I took a test for the government. And in taking the test and doing the interviews with the government agency that I interviewed with, I came across a little book that got into a subject that was of interest at the time, and that was the bombing of Hiroshima. And one of the analysts who were writing in this book speculated that if the sequence of events that occurred, if the Japanese council hadn't been late in delivering the note, if things had gone the way they should, and the communique was properly understood, the dropping of the bomb might have been avoided. But the particular phrase that was used in reply, because the American president wrote a note over and said, you know, we have this bomb and we're going to drop it on you if you don't surrender and this and that. And the reply they sent back was a one-word reply. But that reply depended on how you said it. If you said it passively, without a lot of aggression, it meant one thing. If you said it aggressively with anger or hatred, it meant another thing. But without the ability to actually hear that expressed, it was left to the interpretation of whoever read the word on the piece of paper they got. And from there, history tells you that we dropped the bomb. But language, the interpretation of it, did it mean what they said it mean? Does anything mean what you say it means? I mean, you know, when we sit up here and listen, pardon the expression, to the White House press secretary when they make their statement, and then 10 minutes later the president comes out and makes his statement, and then 4 hours later the president tweets something. I mean, you know, which statement actually comprises the true feeling?
None of them.
But to make a long story short, that's the importance of language. That's the importance of communication. I mean, when you're standing outside and a couple of the fellas go at it on the playground, is it really about something either one of them have done? Or is it about language? Is it about usage? Is it about pride and ego and how... And aren't those things, when you're talking about nation states, called diplomacy? So, I mean, you know, we can walk it all the way up the chain, from the single individual to the largest country in the world. We got to learn how to communicate, and it starts with language. Whether I'm learning another language in an attempt to understand that culture, whether they're learning my language in an attempt to understand my culture, still a common ground. We got to meet halfway. I mean, nobody can assume all of the burden of learning any one thing about anybody. We all got to meet halfway.
No, that's very true.
Well,
Cybersecurity. Why is this important to know? Are you talking about hacking?
that's one of the that's one of the areas. It's something that, like any body of knowledge, this has evolved quickly. I mean, in the year like 2000, if we thought we had some antivirus, we thought that would be fine. You know, after 9/11 and the last 15 years or so, in the growth of social media, security has meant a lot of different things. And I like you to think of security as a process. It's sort of like you know, it's just like if you lock your door, that's good, and if you had an extra latch, that's good, and if you put maybe some security system on there so that you know, like ADT or something, that would be good. Well, cybersecurity is the same way. I mean, I want to point out, like, if somebody wanted to know what's going on with their privacy, they could add to either Chrome or to Mozilla an add-on called Collusion that would show you in a separate window. You just pop open a tab, and you could see with each site that you open how many folks are following you around, and they'd be following you around. I've demoed before at one of our conference for junior high and high school students that were visiting the college, a STEAM conference, just picking out sites like Nick Jr. or other children's sites. How many people are basically stalking and following people around, seeing what they do? And so I like to turn it into real world things that anyone could do, like maybe you might want to get a virtual private network, a VPN, within, if you used a browser called Opera rather than using Chrome, there's one of their options to use that for free. Now what would that do? Well, this would make it so that Comcast or AT&T or whomever, Huawei or whoever happens to be your ISP, can't look at each and every place that you search. This information is your privacy. We can't really cloak ourselves, but we can at least lower our exposure by understanding, oh, if I use a VPN or a virtual private network, now I have a tube going from my computer to some VPN provider, so now Comcast and AT&T don't know exactly what I'm doing. Doesn't mean I'm doing bad things. It just means that I don't want each and every click that I do to suddenly become part of some big data that other folks can use. So yes, it has to do with cybersecurity. It has to do with hacking. Understand there are competitions, like at the college, and DePaul does this, and IT does this. You have the red team, which might be trying to be offensive, attacking the servers, and you have the blue team that is trying to somehow protect the servers and things like that. So thinking of security as a process, understanding that that there's a balancing act between you know, it's like rights and responsibilities, or freedoms and other things. I mean, if one thinks about, okay, what am I going to do to protect my computer? And that could also be things like, I'm gonna create I'll make a backup. Maybe I'll use the cloud. Maybe I'll use Dropbox. Maybe I'll use OneDrive if I like the Microsoft side, or the Google Drive if I like the Google side. Have I backed up my things? And then also some knowledge so that if you go to a place like, let's say a Starbucks or someplace where there's no encryption on the network. So in other words, someone else could sit in that same cafeteria or wherever it is, and they could basically track what you're doing. Maybe it'd be a bad idea to buy that airline ticket or do your banking right then. Why not wait until you're in some, like your home, where things are encrypted and things like that. So what we do in our seminars is I'll try to break it down to, depending on the audience, you know, a level where they can understand. It's about your safety, and it's about your privacy, and you know, and if it's a business, it's about your ability to have your business continue, to not lose the list of your contacts, to not have their financial, their personal information stolen.
Interesting.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Because now, I mean, like, I'm not a computer person, but like, I used to download a lot of MP3s, you know, and like, and I would wonder, like,
Legally, though.
yeah, legally, right? Yeah. Legally, I used to, and I was wondering where I was getting all these viruses from. You know what I'm saying? And then I was reading, you know, this report, and it was saying that, you know, like hackers and people like that, sites where, you know, like at this particular MP3 site, I mean, like millions of people use that site, so they go to those sites, you know, to inject their viruses. You know what I'm saying? I use Google a lot, you know, but like you were talking about that you know, they can track where you're browsing, you know what I'm saying? And I get messages up on my computer all the time saying, Google is tracking the sites that you're going to, you know what I'm saying? You turn off tracking and stuff, and I'm sitting there like, oh wow, you know, and you mentioned social media, my Facebook page is so hacked I don't even use it no more. You know, so those things are very important, you know. I mean, change around your virus protection, stuff like that, you know, but you do want to keep your information safe, because one of the things that I found, I love going up online, and like, I mean, it's so much easier, you know, paying bills and stuff like that. It's so much easier, and you know, you don't have that paper trail. But now I'm starting to think that maybe I need that paper trail, you know what I'm saying? Because if I have to, you know, if I have to stop going online, then we're gonna have to go back to the old way of doing stuff.
If you get an email from somebody you don't know and you have a link, please don't click that link, because you'll be paying in Bitcoin very shortly thereafter if you do.
Now, who are some famous Black Chicagoans?
Oh, okay. Famous Black Chicagoans. Well, you probably heard of Gwendolyn Brooks. She's a famous Black Chicagoan. St. Clair Drake and Horace Clayton, they wrote the book called Black Metropolis, which is a book that I've read, and when I do tours, of course, a lot of the stuff that they talk about, the people want to see, you know, the things that they talk about. Let's see, Harold Washington,
Richard Wright.
Richard Wright, the author who wrote Native Son.
Native Son.
My goodness, there's so many of them.
Political heroes. You say Gwendolyn Brooks, right?
Yeah. You mentioned Gwendolyn Brooks. There's Freddie Hampton. I mean,
you know what? Fred Hampton is
Mark Clark.
Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, the Black Panthers that were, you know, assassinated back in the 70s.
A. Philip Randolph.
A. Philip, is he a Chicagoan?
He worked in Chicago. I think he came out of New York. But at either rate, we'll accord him the honor.
Yeah.
We adopt you, A. Philip Randolph.
Of the Pullman Porter, you know, Pullman Porter workers. I mean, this was a big in the labor unions.
Yes, he was very big in the labor unions. My goodness.
Anthony Overton.
Yeah, Anthony Overton.
Of the Overton Cosmetics. Jesse Binger Bank.
The Johnson Publishing.
Johnson
people.
Publishing.
I mean, my goodness.
John H. Johnson.
We got people alive now. Jesse Jackson. Let me
Danny
see.
Davis,
Timothy
Bobby
Evans.
Rush.
Louis Farrakhan.
Louis Farrakhan.
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Chicago's got just such a rich history.
We don't really think of people that we see every day as famous, but I guess they are famous. I mean, you know, when you can see we wouldn't have thought of Barack Obama as famous as me.
Oh yeah, how can we forget him?
Down on 47th Street when he used to come around the corner and shop at the stores or something like that. So, I mean, you know, I guess fame is fleeting. Flame is relative, but yeah.
But you know that you mentioned Barack Obama because I did a tour and it was a family tour. These people came from California. And it was like a mom and her daughter and an auntie and stuff. But the one thing they wanted to see was where Barack Obama lived at. You know what I'm saying? And it was so funny because on that tour, you know, like when you reach where he lives at, the Secret Service is right there. I mean, they got it all cordoned off and everything. So the lady was like, let's go around the back. You know what I'm saying? So I took them around the back and they were up there snapping pictures. And next thing you know, I see him come running out, and the Secret Service is running them away and the lady's daughter is sitting in the car saying, Mama, you're going to get arrested. You know what I'm saying? It was so funny, you know what I'm saying? But it probably was the highlight, you know, the highlight of her tour. And then she wanted to go to one of the restaurants that he always used to frequent. You know what I'm saying? Now, one of them is a place called Medici's, Medici, you know, it's a different way. But, and then Valois, that's down on 53rd, was one of the places. So, you know, Barack Obama is in the future. He's going to be a very famous Chicagoan that you know that is going to get a lot of fanfare. Yeah,
they probably like Michelle better though.
Well, yeah, and once they build the library, it's over. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like that's going to be a vocal point and a starting point for a lot of. I know, especially for a lot of tours. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah. Now, for Sawbuck's seminar. This is about keeping good records?
Yes, it is.
4 parts.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure I can. Sawbuck Seminars is a response to a number of meetings that we've gone to. We sit up in these meetings and a lot of times they're with large funding organization or banks or someone like that. And the biggest complaint we've heard over and over again is that we don't keep good records. We don't have a good record-keeping system. And going back to our discussion about language, I sit there and I listen to this 3 or 4 different times, almost every meeting I go to, but there doesn't seem to be an improvement. You know, if you go to a meeting and someone says, well, you know, we're having trouble working with you because you don't keep good records. And then, you know, 6 months later they come back and they say the same thing. And 6 months later they come back and they say the same thing. You have to wonder, what am I missing here? You know, what is it that I'm not doing? What is it about record keeping that they're expecting that I'm not giving? You know, what is all this? So at NDS, we stopped and we took a look and we had to ask ourselves the question, what is a record? You know, what makes a good record? And when you look at the IRS, they don't have a very descriptive thing. A good record is something that you keep, you know, on a periodic basis and that you write something down. And that's about the extent of what the IRS calls a good record.
Well, I want to break this down a little bit. They have a list of what is expected by the IRS. So, and there's an idea management that if you tell somebody repeatedly that they should do something and they still aren't doing it, maybe they need to be trained. So we just broke it down into 4 different steps here. And really it's what records should you keep so that you're on good paper with the IRS, because that's when people lose their 501c3s. It's almost always because they didn't put their forms in and they didn't keep the records, and maybe they commingled the funds and all these things. So there's that part of it. Then there's Norman has the record keeping part where it actually shows, oh well, here are the different packages that you could use, and here's how. And now that you know what you should be keeping track of, and should you have separate bank accounts? If somebody donates money to you, should you have a separate bank account for that money, or should you have it in just one account or for a project? So we have all those things together. Then when it finally gets to my part of it, it's like, okay, well now you got these records, what happens if your server crashes? And then it becomes something like, well, gosh, I guess I could set it up using maybe the traditional backups, or some external drive, or I could use the cloud, and I could every day or every half an hour or whatever you want, how often would I copy those records that Norman told them to do? And then at the very end of the Sawbuck seminars, Miss Allen actually says, okay, now we know what you have to do. We could go over into this into the room where the computers are, and if you'd like to set up your business, whether it be a nonprofit, whether it be an LLC, whether it be a corporation or a partnership, if you want to do that and you want to get online right now, and you have the fees to pay for that, not us, but to the state, we're going to make sure that this happens. So it's a 4-part seminar, but it starts from theoretically, what the heck are we trying to keep track of? How do we keep track of it? How do you back it up so you don't lose it? And by the way, would you like to do it?
In actuality, it breaks down into logs and records, because when you're doing business, keeping a transaction, you're going to want to write down a date and a time. You're going to write down a description. You're going to write down a purpose, and you're going to write down an amount. And basically that's the core of a record. And you're going to keep a log, because as your management, you're going to make decisions. And when you go out and you say, oh no, this has happened, I need to decide X, not Y, then you're going to need a way to write it down, so that when your tax time comes around and you're sitting in front of the IRS agent and he goes, well, why did you do this? You can say, oh, the circumstance changed. On this date at this time, this circumstance occurred, so it made me change from doing this here to doing this here. And that's the reason why I did what I did. But you've got the documentation behind it. Think about, I hate to put it like this, think about Jim Comey, the FBI guy. What if he hadn't walked out of his meetings and kept notes of what Donald Trump had said to him? Would he be at the mercy of whatever Donald Trump said after he left the meeting?
No.
Did it help him to keep notes right after, contemporaneous notes right after? Contemporaneous notes are a log. And if you come out of a meeting where you've met with someone and you have a contentious discussion, things may not go the way that you're interested in, it could very well help that you have contemporaneous notes written just after the meeting, when it's fresh in your mind and clear, not waiting a week from now to write it down because someone has come to you and asked you. And that's the difference. I mean, literally that's the difference. That as you're running your business, as you're taking care of your personal business, and this is going to come to pass on an individual basis, but that you keep good notes, that you document what you do, that you keep good records. What if you're an individual who uses Facebook to generate their income, or uses Twitter or Snapchat, or one of those where you've got a nice following, 20, 30,000 people, and then all of a sudden you need to document what's going on. So it helps on both ends, not only if you're an organization, but even if you're an individual. And that's what Sawbuck Seminars is about.
Okay. That's all that we have for today. Thank you for tuning in to Shaping Young Minds. I'm your host, Mariah. Have a great day.
Wait. For those who say wait, wait for visible unity. Wait for the liberation of the African American village community. I declare unto this great nation that now is the time. Now is the time. The time is now for political empowerment. Collectively, our vote can become a force to be reckoned with. The time is now. funk.